All right, let us begin. Good evening. Can I call you friends now instead of ladies and gentlemen?
Yes,
Good
yes.
evening, friends. We are now embarking in session 4 of Ask the Rabbi, 100 Questions about Judaism. So welcome back to you. I want to begin by saying that tonight is the heaviest session of the whole course. I put out an email telling you that we're probably going to go long tonight because there's so much material to cover. Tonight, we're talking about Jewish history. We're talking about anti-Semitism. We're talking about Israel. We're talking about Gaza, about things that right now divide friends, divide families. These are very contestable subjects we're going to be covering tonight. My goal, as it always is not to present things from a partisan perspective, but to try to be on balance. So I've thought long and hard about how to teach this particular session, and I want to begin with something difficult. The part that almost nobody says out loud. So tonight, I'm going to ask you to hold two things that almost no one is willing to hold together right now. The first one is this. The death of children in Gaza is a horror. I don't know how to say it more plainly than that. The person who's watched the last 2 years and felt nothing has lost something he should be afraid to lose. I'm not going to spend one sentence tonight persuading you that the suffering was exaggerated or that those children mattered less because of where they were born. They were children. That's the whole of it. So that's the first thing. Now, the second. On the morning of October 7th, 2023, Hamas gunmen crossed the border. They went house to house. They murdered roughly 1,200 people in their homes and at a music festival. They raped women before they killed them. They dragged hundreds of hostages, from infants to the elderly, back to Gaza. I will not let that morning dissolve into abstraction. Both of these things that I mentioned are true. And a person who can only hold one of them is not yet ready to talk about the other. So tonight is not about persuading you to agree with every decision made by the state of Israel. It's not about silencing criticism. And it's not about asking for moral exemptions. Rather, it's about fairness. Fairness is how history is remembered. Fairness is how moral language is applied. Fairness is how judgment is distributed. And that's all that this lesson asks. Not allegiance, not silence, just fairness. One small change for tonight. We usually open our session with Stump the Rabbi. Your questions about anything at all. Tonight, I'm going to move that to the end of the session. The reason is simple. Tonight's material is the heaviest of the course. And I want us to stay in that teaching arc without interruption until we get there. So if the question comes up while we're moving through the material, please write it down and we'll cover it afterwards. However, if you need to ask questions or need clarification about what's pertinent with the subject that we're talking about, then please interrupt. Don't interrupt. Just chime in if it's on target. If it's not on target, I'm going to ask you to wait until the end of the session so that we can have some continuity. Welcome to all the new faces that have just showed up in the last few minutes. So we'll have plenty of time afterwards, but I do expect us to run quite a bit longer than 9 o'clock this evening. So here's the roadmap for tonight. Number one, what is the actual pattern of Jewish history? Number two, why does anti-Semitism keep returning in new forms? Number three, why is Israel held to standards no other nation is asked to meet? How does Judaism teach us to talk about Gaza without losing either truth or compassion. And what is, finally, the so-called Israel lobby, and what do the numbers actually show?
This is good. She should get on it.
I put everyone on mute, so if you'd like to contribute, then just take yourself off mute. So the one thread running through everything we're talking tonight is fairness. You'll see in the workbook that I distributed it before we began the first session, the first handout for section 4 deals with Middle East geography, scale, and population. You can look at that on your own time, but I just want to give you some context for what we're discussing. Israel is roughly the size of New Jersey. It's surrounded by states, Arab states, Muslim states, that are 100 times its size, with population more than 50 times its own. That's just geography, so hold it in mind and we'll come back to it. Now, Jewish history is often taught as a catalog of suffering. Exile, persecution, pogroms, genocide. The history is real, but it's not the deepest pattern. The defining feature of Jewish history is something stranger than that. For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people have lived without sovereignty, without armies, without secure borders, without the ability to enforce justice. And yet Jewish civilization did not dissolve. The law functioned, education remained central, moral obligation remained binding, even when costly. Judaism trained generations of Jews to live responsibly without expecting protection. That historical memory matters. Because when Jews finally regained power, as they did in 1948, the world, we can see, does not know quite how to process that information. I want to start this evening with anti-Semitism. To understand anti-Semitism, we have to let go of one idea. The idea that anti-Semitism is a single belief or even a single hatred. Anti-Semitism is much better understood as a recurring role that Jews are made to play in the moral drama of whatever civilization they happen to live in. The script changes, the language changes, the accusation remains. But before we trace that through history, I want to share something that Jewish tradition has always carried. Long before there was a sociology of anti-Semitism, the Torah itself was already describing the pattern. Not predicting specific events, but describing a recurring shape. It begins with two brothers, Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esau, twins, born minutes apart. Our tradition reads these two brothers not merely as individuals, but as two enduring ways of being in the world. Esau is the way of force. He's the way of the hunt, of immediate strength, a power that takes what it wants because it can. Jacob is the way of the covenant, of the tent, of study, of long, patient work, of moral witness in a world that often rewards the opposite. And there's a line right there in Genesis from the most famous and explicit Jewish commentator from medieval times. His name was Rashi. He said, translated in English, it is an immutable law that Esau hates Jacob. I want to be careful here because this line can be misheard. It's not a statement that any people, any nation, any faith is doomed to hate Jews forever. It's not a verdict about Gentiles or about Christians or about anyone in this room. It's something much quieter, something more profound. It's our tradition's testimony that the friction between the way of the covenant and the way of raw power is old, older than any of its modern costumes. The Jewish people have never been blindsided by this because the Torah told us what to expect. Let's turn the page from Genesis to Exodus. In Egypt, we watch a pattern become state policy for the first time. First chapter of Exodus, verse 9. Behold, the people of the children of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal cunningly with them, lest they multiply. Notice the sequence of the sentence. First, the Jews have prospered, then they grow, then they multiply, they've done well, and then the prosperity itself becomes the threat. Hence, let us deal cunningly with them. A manufactured danger, a cunning plan, and from there comes slavery, and then the order to murder all the newborn boys. Look at the pattern: prosperity, suspicion, manufactured threat, policy. And that's what we see playing out over and over again. Let me give you one more. Comes Amalek. Right after the splitting of the Red Sea, we are confronted by an enemy called Amalek. Amalek attacks us in the wilderness, just after the Exodus. And here's what matters about that. Amalek had absolutely no grievance with the Jews. They had no territorial dispute, no theological argument, no history of conflict. The Jews didn't do anything to them. And the Torah tells us how they attacked the Jews. They attacked us from behind, at the rear of the camp, where the weakest, the slowest, the most tired were struggling to keep up. So this is the best example we had of baseless hatred. And this is the deepest version of the point I'm going to be making all night. We tend to assume that if we could just explain ourselves better, just behave well enough, just give no cause, the hatred would stop. If I told you how many conversations I have, how many committees I'm in, where the conversation is, if we just had better public relations, if we could just show everybody that we're the good guys, all the hatred would stop. But Amalek tells us 3,400 years ago, that's not the case. Sometimes the accusation comes first, and the reason is invented afterwards to justify it. The Torah commands us to remember Amalek, not to hunt for Amalek among the nations. That's not the command. I want to be clear about that. The command is to remember the category. Baseless hatred is real. It recurs, and it cannot always be argued away. So let's start in the history. Let me show you how the pattern actually plays out across the centuries. Let's begin with the ancient world, the antiquities. In the ancient pagan world,
coming through your ear here and there, just probably won't play anything.
in the ancient pagan world, the highest moral value was loyalty. Loyalty to the gods, to the city, to the empire. Religion was not private, it was a civic duty. To worship the gods was to uphold the social order of the empire. Jews from the beginning did not fit. They refused to worship the local gods. They refused civic religious rituals. They insisted on a God who could not be seen, represented, or localized. That refusal was not understood as conscience. It was understood as subversion. In that world, Jews were dangerous because they were different. Fast forward. After the dispersion of the Second Temple, as Christianity reshaped Europe, the moral language changed. Now the central question was theological truth. And again, Jews did not fit in. Jews were the people who carried the Bible and yet rejected its Christian reading. Jews lived among Christians and yet refused to be converted. So the accusation shifted. We were no longer merely subversive. We were now spiritually obstinate, even malevolent. In that world, Jews were dangerous because their continued existence raised uncomfortable theological questions. Fast forward. I want to pause on one figure in particular because his story captures the whole pattern in a single human life. I'm speaking of Martin Luther, the founder of Protestant Reformation, one of the most consequential figures in the history of the Western world. And I want to be careful and I want to be clear from the outset. I am not putting Protestantism on trial. I'm not putting anyone in this room on trial. I'm telling you a documented history because honesty requires it. So here's what most people know. Early in his life, Martin Luther was, by the standards of his time, relatively sympathetic to the Jews. In 1523, he wrote a pamphlet titled that Jesus Christ was born a Jew. In it, he criticizes the Catholic Church for its cruelty towards Jews. He argued that if Jews had been treated badly, no wonder they had not been converted. His hope was simple: treat the Jews kindly, show them the Reformed faith, and they will convert. And then we didn't. The Jews did not convert. The Jews remained Jews. And Luther turned. In 1543, near the end of his life, he published a treatise whose title tells you everything. On the Jews and Their Lies is the name of his book. It's one of the most vicious anti-Semitic documents ever produced in Europe. And it didn't stop at insult. It contained a program. Luther advised, and these are his recommendations, that synagogues and Jewish schools be set on fire, that Jewish homes be razed and destroyed, that Jewish prayer books and Talmudic writings be taken away, that rabbis be forbidden to teach on pain of death, that safe passage on the roads be abolished for Jews, that their money be seized, and that the young and able-bodied be put to forced labor. Burn the synagogues, burn the books, raze the homes, silence the teachers, seize the property. Now, here's why this matters for the pattern that I'm trying to establish. Look at the shape of Martin Luther's turn, beginning with sympathy, conditional on conversion. The condition is unmet, the Jews stay Jews, and then the sympathy curdles into a program of destruction. That's the same shape that we saw with Pharaoh. Unfortunately, that's the same shape that we will see again. The welcome was real, but it was a conditional welcome. There's one thing I really can't leave out, and that is nearly 400 years after Luther, his treatise was quoted by the Nazis approvingly as evidence that hostility towards Jews had deep roots in German Christian history. On the night of November 9th, 1938, Kristallnacht, the breaking of the glass, the smashing of all the storefronts in Jewish neighborhoods. When synagogues across Germany were burned, some Nazis pointed out that the synagogues were burning on the eve of Luther's birthday, and they framed it as a fulfillment of his recommendations. Burn the synagogues, he wrote in 1543. They did it in 1938. I'm not telling you that Luther caused the Holocaust. But what's not debated is that the words existed, the words were preserved, and they were there to be used when the moment was ripe. This is the pattern. The explanations change, the accusations get recycled, and the words once written do not disappear. For about 1,500 years then, the European charge against the Jews had been roughly the same. You don't belong here. You don't belong because you refuse to assimilate, because you keep yourselves apart, because you won't join the rest of us. And then in the late 1700s, something extraordinary happened. Yes, I'm referring to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment swept through Europe. Reason all of a sudden was elevated above tradition. Universal human rights became a political idea. Napoleon, as he marched across the continent, did something no European ruler had ever done. He opened up the gates of the ghettos where the Jews lived. He tore down the gates. He granted the Jews legal equality. He invited them to become citizens in France, in Italy, in the German states that he was in control of. And gradually across the 19th century, emancipation spread. In one country after another, Jews were finally told, you are welcome here. And here's what the Jews did with it. They accepted it. We learned the local languages. We westernized our dress. We took European names. We sent our children to universities. We entered their professions, law, medicine, science, journalism, finance, the arts. We served in their armies and died for European countries. Within a few generations, Jews were contributing to European culture at a rate, you know what I'm going to say, far out of proportion to our numbers. Freud, Einstein, Mahler, Kafka, Mendelssohn, you name it. Some of the most consequential minds of the modern age. We did exactly what we were told to do. We assimilated. I want to share with you just briefly the internal story. Everything I described is happening externally, but there was a parallel happening inside Jewish life. Because the same emancipation that opened European doors to Jews forced an enormous question. The question is, what does it mean to be a Jew in the modern world? For most of Jewish history, Jews lived in a tight traditional community governed by Jewish law with little contact with the surrounding culture. Emancipation blew the doors off that. And three Jewish responses emerged. The first chronologically, was Reform Judaism. Reform Judaism was born in Germany in the early 1800s. It was the boldest answer to the emancipation. Basically, let us modernize our tradition to fit a modern integrated life, translate the prayers into local languages, reform the ritual, reframe Jewish law as only guidance and not have it be binding. 40 years later came conservative Judaism, a more cautious sort of middle path. Yes to modernization, but more slowly and with more of the tradition preserved. And finally, how did Orthodoxy respond to all this? Orthodoxy held the line on Jewish law. Orthodoxy began to engage modernity, but refused to be reshaped by it. I'm making short shrift of all this because I'm just trying to give context. But basically, we have three movements that have subsequently, I won't say morphed, but have changed quite a bit over the last 100 to 200 years. We'll come back to that in a future session. But for tonight, what matters is the timing. Because at the exact moment that the Jews were recognizing their internal life, reorganizing their internal life to meet emancipation, the external accusation was mutating into something new. So here's what happens next. Jews did exactly what they were told. We assimilated. And guess what? The world did not love us anymore for that assimilation. It just found a different way to hate us. Here's the new accusation that got born from the Enlightenment. You're too assimilated. You've infiltrated. You've taken positions you don't deserve. You're rootless cosmopolitans pretending to be citizens. You can never truly be one of us because your blood is different. For 1,500 years, Jews have been told you don't belong because you won't assimilate. Now Jews are told you don't belong because you have assimilated. Before the Second World War, Jews are told to get out of Europe. They got out of Europe either through the crematoria or by making aliyah to Israel or coming to the States. Now what are they told? Get out of Israel. The accusation that produced ghettos in the year 1500 and the accusation that produced Auschwitz in 1940 are opposite accusations, but the target remains identical. And this, more than anything else, is why race has to be invented as a category. The old theological anti-Semitism couldn't survive Jewish integration. If a Jew converted, theology had no more accusation to make. If a Jew assimilated, what could the complaint possibly be? So the framework had to change. And that gave birth to race-made anti-Semitism. You couldn't convert your way out of it. You couldn't assimilate your way out of it. You couldn't marry, baptize, or educate your way out of it because the accusation was no longer about what you believed or how you lived or what side of the church door you stood on. The accusation was about your blood. And from that framework came the darkest chapter in Jewish history. You know what that is. That was Hitler. Let's move on. Don't want to dwell on that. This timeline that I'm discussing doesn't move just through Europe. In much of the Islamic world, Jews were tolerated. Quite frankly, tolerated better than in Christian Europe. But tolerance came with a condition, and that is a hierarchy. There were a couple of million Jews living within the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa from the time of the dispersion of the Second Temple. They had lived there from that point in the first century for 2,000 years until the modern establishment of the State of Israel, when they had to get out of Dodge real quick. So Jews that lived in these Muslim lands were protected, but subordinated. We were allowed to live, but not to rise too high. And when, we did rise too high, when we prospered, when we educated ourselves, when we gained influence, the resentment followed immediately. As nation states consolidated in the 19th century and in the 20th century, the new question became, who truly belongs? Jews had assimilated. They adopted local languages, customs, professions, all that stuff that we talked about. They served in the armies, blah, blah, blah. The suspicion shifted again. Now Jews were accused and continue to be accused of dual loyalty. Was the Jew really French? Was the Jew really German? Is the Jew really American? Are we really loyal citizens? Or do we belong somewhere else? We're too visible, we're too mobile, we're too interconnected in a world obsessed with national purity. Jews become a symbol of rootlessness. That's root, R-O-O-T, not ruthlessness. Yeah, and this all ended up, as you know, with a Holocaust with 6 million murdered. Let's fast forward to today. Today, the dominant moral language is about power. Who has it? Who abuses it? Who is illegitimate in wielding it? And once again, Jews do not fit comfortably. For most of history, Jews were powerless and accused. Now Jews have power and are accused. But the accusation has changed. First, we were blamed for rejecting God. Now we're blamed for violating humanity. Once we were accused of secret power. Now the accusation is made openly, but only in one direction. And this is what I want you to notice. And I'm sorry for going long, and we're going to take a break from this in just a minute. But I wanted to get this first section out first. The explanation changes, the target does not. That's the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like the man who walks into the forest and sees arrows shot into trees, each one a perfect bullseye. He never saw such mastery with a bow and arrow in his life. He looks around the forest, he finds a young man with a quiver and a bow and an arrow, and he says, "Did you shoot all those arrows?" He says, "Yes, I did." He says, "Oh, please give me a demonstration. I've never seen anything like this. It's remarkable." So the man pulls an arrow out from the quiver, hits the side of a tree with it, walks over to the tree, pulls out a piece of chalk and draws the target around it. That's what we're talking about. Once we see the pattern, once we see how anti-Semitism adapts, something else becomes easier to see. There's a sentence that appears again and again in public discourse amongst good people, amongst our friends. And the sentence is usually something like this: I support Israel's right to exist. Sounds reasonable. It sounds generous. Thank God somebody supports our right to exist. But if you just pause for a second and ask, why is this sentence never required of any other nation? No one says, I support Ireland's right to exist. I support Uganda's right to exist. Existence is not conditional elsewhere, only here. So the question itself carries an accusation that Jewish sovereignty is provisional, revocable, pending moral approval. Ironically, Jews are the original indigenous people. We did not arrive in Israel with a mother country behind us. We arrived with a memory stretching back 3,800 years. Yes, Jewish prayer has pointed towards Jerusalem for 3,000 years. Jewish law in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, regulates agriculture. Where? In Israel. Jewish holidays follow the seasons of Israel. Jewish mourning rituals remember the destruction of the temple. Just want to give you a couple of facts, and then we're going to take a break from this. Around 1948, which was the year that Israel was established as a modern state, there had been, up until that point, 850,000 Jews remaining in Arab and Muslim countries. and they were forced, expelled, forced to flee from Iraq, from Egypt, from Yemen, from Libya, from Syria, from Morocco. Property confiscated, citizenship revoked, no international compensation, no dedicated United Nations relief agency, no right of return. They were absorbed by Israel. They became citizens, not long-term refugee camp residents. Finally, in 1948, when the United Nations declared the partition of the British Mandate and separated the land into two different states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. Israel was invaded by five armies. I'm not going to give you the story. Everyone knows the story. After all the dust settled, there was a sizable Arab population that remained in today's Israel, and they still remain. How are those Israeli Arabs treated? Well, they vote. They have an elected parliament. There are 4 Arab parties within the Israeli government. They're part of an independent judiciary. From the Supreme Court, there is 1 Arab Supreme Court justice and 1 Druze Supreme Court justice. They have freedom of worship. They have freedom to protest, which is a whole lot more compared to most states, most Arab states in the region. I am not claiming Israel is perfect. I'm just saying comparisons matter. Okay. I still have a voice, and my tea is cold. Questions, comments on this subject specifically? Richard, hit me.
Okay. Great coverage on Martin Luther. I put a link to a 12-minute video that I use when I teach Christianity. And it covers Martin Luther, including his anti-Semitic writings. As a Protestant, I really do think that's important for Protestants to be aware of. Not everything Martin Luther said or did is worthy of emulation or supporting. You know, his anti-Semitic writings, point blank, need to be loudly denounced. So I put that link in there if anybody's curious. It's about a 12-minute video I use in my introductory class.
Richard, before you go on, I just want to say that that video comes from Richard. I didn't see it, so I can't endorse it or oppose it.
Yeah.
But I want to be very careful to say that I'm not condemning Protestantism. In fact, Protestantism is, from my perspective, something marvelous. From a Jewish perspective, it's been extremely helpful and beneficial for all of mankind. I just want to say that clearly. Go on with what you're saying, Richard.
Sure, I agree with you completely. At the same time, you know, as individual critical thinkers, we have to examine the entirety of what Martin Luther said and did and point out where he missed the mark. So we have a duty to carry that forward. So yeah, just put that out there. It's a little 12-minute video that you guys might find interesting, but nothing controversial in it. It's just a you know, historical recounting of Luther's work. And yeah, I'm a Protestant, so there's a whole lot that he was responsible for that I certainly do agree with, but his anti-Semitism is something that I stand firmly opposed to.
Okay, did you want to say anything else? Anybody else have anything to say before we move on? All right. Now we come to Gaza. Before I say anything else, I have to start where I started this evening. The civilian deaths in Gaza are real. They're vast. They include thousands of children. I'm not going to minimize any of that. I'm not going to explain that away. I'm not going to measure it against other suffering to make it seem as though it's smaller. If a child died in the rubble, that child mattered. Whatever flag flew above the building, whatever movement claimed the neighborhood, the child mattered. Judaism is unusually strict about this. Let me share with you two teachings from inside Judaism that I carry into every conversation about this war. The first one comes from a moment of deliverance. When Israel fled Egypt, the sea parted to let us pass, and then, as you know, closed over Pharaoh's army. Remember Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner? Yeah? Okay, just making sure. The brutal aggressors drowned. It was as clear a deliverance as their tradition ever records. And when the angels in heaven rose to sing at the sight of what they witnessed, our sages teach that God silenced the angels. It says in the Talmud, in Tractate Megillah, 10th chapter, God says, the work of my hands is drowning in the sea, and you wish to recite a song? Even the enemy's death, even their just death, even then, one more teaching. Some of you have actually seen this if you've been at a Passover Seder before. At the Passover Seder, one of the obligations is to drink 4 cups of wine. We just call it an obligation. It's actually a pleasure. But 4 cups of wine. At a certain L'chaim Michel, we remove so during the course, when we recite the plagues, part of the Passover Seder is to recite each one of the 10 plagues. The 10 plagues that afflicted the Egyptians. Blood and frogs and lice and boils and all the way to slaying of the firstborn. With each plague we mention, we lift up the cup of wine and we spill a drop. Blood, frogs, lice, wild animals, darkness, hail, firstborn. We pour out wine. We decrease our joy by our own hand. We diminish our joy by our own hand. Judaism does not teach us to celebrate. Judaism teaches us to grieve even an enemy's dead. So here's the principle that allows us to do this honestly. Eulogy is not confession. Grief does not require authorship. You can mourn a dead child fully without the hidden sentence, and it's my fault. That hidden sentence is what tempts people to suppress the grief in order to avoid the guilt. You get that? That's backwards. And that's why when you see spokespeople for either side, they sound cold. One can mourn without apologizing. Let me introduce, of all people, Golda Meir, who said it best. Former Prime Minister of Israel, spoke in the language of war. She said, when peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Golda does not deny the killing. She does not pretend that the Jewish side hands are clean. She grieves what the war demanded and names who demanded it in a single breath. Which brings us to the part that's often missing from the public conversation. All these deaths have authors and they have history. Hamas began this war on October 7th. Hamas held hostages. Hamas repeatedly refused terms. Release the hostages, lay down arms, that would have ended the war on the spot. But there's a narrative that presents the war as something unprovoked, and the Palestinian dead as authorless, has erased the central actor. What am I trying to say? I want to be careful here. Hamas bears primary deliberate responsibility for the civilian deaths that result from war they chose to start. They chose to fight from inside homes, hospitals, and schools. Primary, deliberate, but primary is not sole. A powerful military like Israel still answers for its own targeting choices. Two agents can both be responsible for the same death. This is not a concession. It's the same principle we used against them, a refusal of one-sided accounting. Let's look at the words being used, because words matter. Notice which words are chosen. Not war, not the high cost of urban combat, rather genocide, baby killer. These are not arguments. These are detonations. They are placed precisely because they bypass reasoning and they trigger revulsion. Baby killer is a blood libel adjacent language built to incite, not to inform. The question to put back on anyone using this language is, why is the most emotionally radioactive possible term being selected? And what does that choice tell you about whether the goal is understanding or the goal is incitement? So I suggest we should be suspicious of any word that's built to keep us from looking closely. The one who reaches first for the most explosive term is rarely the one most troubled by the dead. He's the one most interested in the fight. Here's an argument most people have never really heard laid out plainly. Hamas openly fights from inside homes, hospitals, schools, and mosques. It builds tunnels under apartment buildings. It launches rockets from beside United Nations facilities. This is strategy. It's not an accident, it's strategy. And here's the thing about that strategy that most people miss. Human shield tactics only make military sense if the shielding party believes the attacker is trying to avoid civilian deaths. If Israel actually sought to kill civilians as such, embedding among them would be ludicrous. The reason that Hamas has embedded themselves within the civilian population is because they know that Israel is trying to purposely avoid killing civilians. So the tactic itself is evidence against the accusation it's used to support. One more piece to know before we move on. For nearly 4 decades, 40 years of direct Israeli administration of Gaza and the West Bank, Israel controlled Gaza from 1967. There was never an independent state called Gaza. There was never an independent state called Palestine. From 1948 until 1967, Gaza was controlled by Egypt. When Egypt attacked Israel in 1967, when Israel fought a preemptive strike, launched a preemptive strike against Egypt in 1967, Egypt was pushed all the way back, and Israel inherited Gaza from Egypt from 1967 until 2005. During that period of time, during those almost 40 years, the population of those territories more than doubled. Life expectancy in Gaza rose roughly 14 years across that period, from the late 1940s into the mid-60s. That figure comes from the United Nations, not from Israel. I want to be careful with this because the data does not prove that occupation is good. It doesn't prove that it was welcome. It doesn't address the current war. What it does refute is the specific claim that Jews have been committing genocide for 75 years. A population that grows, a lifespan that rises by 14 years. These are not the demographic signatures of a campaign to destroy a people. I want to finish out this section and then ask for questions. I want to close this part with something that the prophets gave us. The same prophet who saw the Jewish people through exile promised a day when the nations would beat their swords into plowshares and study war no more. You're all familiar with Isaiah. When the wolf would lie down with the lamb, when the child would play unharmed. Isaiah was not a bliss ninny. He had his feet on the ground, he had his eyes open, he knew exactly what was going on. He didn't pretend that that messianic day had come. He wrote in a time that was at least as dark as our time. He held that out, not as comfort. He held it out as a command. The world that we are obligated to keep building towards. Even while the rockets fall, even while the graves are filled. This is the harder hope, the kind that hopefully survives the news. Convenience was never an offer, not from the truth, not from the work of repairing what the truth reveals. By the way, you should know that we're moving through this much faster than I anticipated. So I want to open up for questions, comments, critiques, clarifications, any other alliterations that begin with the letter C. No? Richard.
If I'm not mistaken, Hamas's charter specifically calls for the annihilation of Israel.
Correct.
So any movement, any group of people that calls for the genocidal annihilation of another people, that's got to be a huge red flag right up front. If you let those people loose, bad things will happen.
You know, there is an Israeli politician, former general, his name was, I only know his nickname is Bogi, but I forgot his name. Well, that's not good. Anyway, he made the following statement. He said, Gaza is like sticking your fingers. Have you ever been to Chinatown? Those, they call them Chinese finger prisms, where you stick your fingers in. They're made from like crochet or something, straw, and you go to pull your fingers out, but you can't because everything tightens around it. So Gaza is a hot potato that nobody wants. Egypt was happy to get rid of it. Israel didn't want it. FYI, Gaza was never part of the Promised Land. Actually, that's somewhat disputed, but The majority opinion is that Gaza is not part of the Promised Land. There are 2 million Arabs living in Gaza who have been trained for the last 30 years to hate Jews. Not a pretty picture. But I will say, just parenthetically, and I spent a lot of time in Gaza myself. First of all, in the 1980s, a friend of mine worked for the military governor of Gaza. So I spent a lot of time there when I was in Israel. And it was actually a very peaceful place. You could walk into the Arab Shuk, the marketplace, and converse and joke and play backgammon and drink Turkish coffee with your Arab friends. There were no issues. It wasn't until the Palestinian Authority was created with the Oslo agreements that things turned extremely sour. People were educated to hate each other. Who else? There's got to be something else. Sheila Randall, my Sheila. How are you, Sheila?
I'm fine, thank you. You know that I was a war baby and my family and I survived the London Blitz.
Can you imagine you're on a Zoom call with somebody who lived through and survived the London Blitz? Remarkable how that worked chronologically, since you're only 42, and that was 80 years ago, but we'll get onto that in a different session. Go on, Sheila.
And my mother and I survived being bombed out of our house. My point is, from my point of view, and what I never knew about Martin Luther being such a rampant anti-Semite. But my point is, how does somebody like me stop being suspicious of what happened to me in my very first formative years? How do I stop worrying and being concerned for my immediate family and everybody else around me, all my Jewish family and Jewish friends? And I lived in Golders Green, where the King visited 2 weeks ago after the anti-Semitism there. I know you don't have the answer, and I know it's a rhetorical question.
Just to give context to the group, Sheila's originally, as you can tell, from London. She now lives in where do you live?
I live in Ball Ground, Georgia.
In Ball Ground, Georgia. But all of her family remains in London, in areas, traditional Jewish neighborhoods that have come under immense belligerent attack recently. So the question is, given her background, given the acute trauma that she suffered as a child, how is she supposed to cope with what's going on now? It's easy to say, well, just tell them to get up and move. It's not such an easy thing to do.
No, I mean, they have roots, they have jobs, hopefully. We moved, the children followed, but that didn't work out and they moved back. But how do people like me stop ourselves from being eternally suspicious and feeling revengeful?
Easy for me to say, but what I'm going to say is counterintuitive. And that is, the only remedy is to live a more Jewish life if you're Jewish. To wear it proudly, to wear the Star of David around your neck, to light Shabbat candles. There you go, Sheila. And to realize what a gift it is to be born a Jew. I think I shared with this group already. Somebody told me that their grandmother, who survived Auschwitz, when asked, no, it was actually the woman herself told me, that when she survived Auschwitz, She was asked the question, if God forbid you were back in Auschwitz and you had the opportunity to trade places with a guard, so the guard would become a prisoner and you'd become the guard, would you do it? She said, not in a million years. I wouldn't trade what I had to endure for anything. So what we have as Jews is precious. And the one thing that frustrates every anti-Semite, that neutralizes every anti-Semite, is a proud Jew. Not a Jew that cowers, not a Jew that hides. Proud Jew. Easy to say, I'm living in a place in Georgia where Christians love us. I don't have to deal with what your kids deal with in Golders Green, London. So you can take what I say with a grain of salt. And I really thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I just want to tell you that my parents brought me up to be proud to be Jewish, and I am. And I would never, ever want to be any other way.
Very good. Who else? Ellen.
Yeah, Tim, if I could add on to what you so eloquently said. And Sheila, thank you. You always share so from your heart. I know your heart and your soul. And thank you, because I don't even pretend to understand what you've experienced in your family and the ongoing feeling that you carry forward. I would like to just add to what Jonathan said that I live in Phoenix, Arizona now, having Jonathan's my brother, and having been raised in Los Angeles and then living in south of that, Huntington Beach, which is in the Orange County area. I practice my Judaism openly, and am proud to say that my daughter and her family, my youngest granddaughter's on her way to camp in Prescott, Arizona, a Jewish camp, Camp Stein, as we speak. And my other granddaughter teaches at the Jewish Community Center, their day camp. I'm telling you this because it's living each and every day, being mindful to be resilient and to be proud. And also, I would say to you that I use my learning to help my friends who may not be Jewish or may not be living within their Judaism to better understand what they think is an innocent Facebook post, let's say, what it really means as a dog whistle, so to say, to incite anti-Semitism. So I would just, Sheila, you speak so eloquently. I would just encourage you to take it into that step to help people understand what Jonathan is sharing with us and what it means in real life.
Thank you. Anyone else? Deborah. Take yourself off mute, Deborah.
There we go. Got it. I just want to add, I'm on the board of the Jewish Congregation of Blue Ridge and also part of the security team. And the fact that we even need to have a security team has always bothered me, but um, I still feel very responsible that we need to protect ourselves and I have to protect the congregation. Like today, I do all the communication stuff. And I was putting all our events on a calendar, and the board, we made the decision not to even show where we're doing our services. I have people contact me, and then I make the decision about letting them know where we're going to be and where we're doing our services. And it just it really saddens me. And I just wanted to express that I'm not afraid. I am very open about my Judaism. I love the community I'm in. I love the Christians that I have befriended and have befriended me. It's sad that we still have to do that, don't we, Yotan, Rabbi Yotan? Don't we still have to be responsible?
If we look at the potential confrontation between Jacob and Esau after Jacob leaves Laban. And Jacob gets the word that Esau is approaching with 400 stormtroopers. And Jacob prepares for that meeting, that confrontation, in three different ways. Number one, he draws up a battle plan and prepares for battle. Number two, he has messengers send gifts to soften up the brother, to try to look at him in a more kindly way, to get him to look at Jacob in a more kindly way. And third of all, he gets on his knees and he prays to God. And he famously says, I'm not even worthy of all your kindnesses. But he sincerely prays and repents. So that's the three-pronged strategy that we have to use today. I can tell you, to me, it's so normal to go to shul, to go to my synagogue on a Saturday morning and to see two security in front with long guns, a sniper on the roof, a few plainclothes walking down the street pretending to be a gardener and a crosswalk guard and whatever, all locked and loaded. And here are the kids skipping on their way to synagogue, joking with the guards. It's normal for them. This is the world that we live in. And this is, unfortunately, the sad temporary reality. But it's not going to last forever. I read the end of the book. It turns out really, really good. I promise you.
Yeah.
Any other questions,
I have
comments?
a question, but it's regarding anti-Semitism. It's
Okay.
not about what you were talking about.
That's okay. Go on.
There's a book that was banned. That's the most anti-Semitic book I heard that there is, called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I don't know
Yeah.
much about it. Could
Yeah.
you enlighten me a little bit about that very anti-Semitic banned book?
Well, unfortunately, it's no more anti-Semitic than just opening up social media today.
Wow.
It's full of anti-Semitic tropes, all the blood libels that Jews kidnap Christian children and use their blood to make matzah.
Okay.
Just the standard variety anti-Semitic stuff. And you read the stuff and say, oh, come on, nobody would ever believe it. But turn on social media and you'll hear it all day long, unfortunately.
Thank you.
And can,
What happened
I-
to Brooke? I saw Brooke a second ago and then she vanished. There you are. Did you want to say something? Brooke?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask the lady that was just speaking a moment ago. I believe her name was Deborah. If I didn't get that correct,
Yes,
she's
Yeah,
the
Deborah.
okay,
it's
I'm sorry.
Deborah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, I mean, is anti-Semitism something that you yourself have experienced in Blue Ridge?
Not too long ago, I think it was I think Robin and Roberta might correct me. Um, there's a gentleman up here that somebody was throwing packets of really some nasty literature, like caricatures and Nazi propaganda and stuff,
Mhm.
onto people's. They put it in a Ziploc bag with a rock and would throw it and toss it onto people's front lawns. And that was done at about two different communities, not necessarily in Blue Ridge. Our congregation is not, everybody doesn't just live in Blue Ridge. I would say
Right.
everything from, I'm in I'm in Talking Rock,
I'm
like
in
close to
Jasper.
Jasper,
Or actually,
very
I'm
close to
in Tate.
Jasper. I mean, Sheila is in Ball Ground. It goes all the way down there, and then we have people from Murphy that even attend our services. So we're very, I would say, the Appalachian region, because I'm also a
Right.
CASA. So I,
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
the three,
Absolutely.
it's the three major
Circuit.
counties, though people have come from further. Anyway,
It did happen in
yes,
Jasper. It was in Jasper, and I have the
it
old.
was in Jasper. I have the information on it, but we have that. Not only that, but there is a Robin, what's the name of the
It was
I don't
the
know, it was
Goyim Defense League.
Howard Winkler. I don't know if he's on the call.
Was it the Goyim Defense League was in charge of that?
Yes.
That was it.
But also we get it's amazing. We get these security alerts through, I want to say it's through JCBR, but it's their security. I mean, believe it or not, they work very closely with the FBI, and watch for activity. It was not too long ago that we were alerted that there was a gentleman that was showing up at synagogues and
Atlanta. Mhm.
Atlanta with some negative comments, and that he had guns, and the FBI
Yeah.
got involved. It's going on. It's out there.
Deborah, I'm gonna ask you to just hold right there because
Yeah,
everything we're talking about is anecdotal right now.
right.
And it's true. And I'm not saying that these things are not true, but I'll also say statistically, the overwhelming proportion of non-Jewish Georgians are very sympathetic to Jews.
Yes,
And I know that
yes.
because I write newspaper columns in, I think it's up to 12 newspapers right now throughout Georgia. And I get all positive comments. Every now and then, once in a blue moon, I'll get a negative one, but very, very rarely. And when it comes to, and I'm in rural Georgia almost every day, and you can see how I look from the screen. I can't exactly hide who I am. I don't blend in anywhere, and I get nothing but love and affection from everybody that I meet. That may not be true in other places, but it's true where I go.
Can I
I just
say,
want to add one
can
thing. Let
I
me just
just,
add one thing very,
Go
very
ahead,
quickly.
Deborah.
What it looks like is these are people that have mental health issues to begin with. They're
Right.
very, very easily persuaded. The majority of the people, I totally agree with you. I've been in Georgia since 92, and I traveled all over the South for my business, and I've never had any problem personally. So I agree with you, Rabbi, that
I'll just share with you.
yeah.
I remember
Thank you.
when Glasnost first came in, when Gorbachev basically opened the Soviet Union. Chabad emissaries from my movement went back into the Soviet Union and started establishing Judaism for people who had been deprived of Judaism. People had been deprived of all religion, from Christianity, from Catholicism, et cetera, et cetera. A friend of mine went to a place called, it's a big city, it's called Krakow. And he was talking to a woman, and I want to do justice to the story. It's a brief story. Give me just a second. This Chabad rabbi goes to the Soviet Union in the 1980s, and this Jewish woman tells him that since Glasnost, since the opening up of the Soviet Union, anti-Semitism has gotten worse. She says, it used to be I would ride the elevator in my building, and there would be somebody in the elevator with me, and he would give me a look that wasn't too friendly, but that was it. Now, somebody gives me a look, and they call me a Zid. Zid is comparable to the N word for a black person. A Zid is for a Jew. And she says, I'm devastated. I don't know what to do. And she says, but Rabbi, it doesn't look like that stuff bothers you. And he says, well, no, it wouldn't bother me at all. And she said, it probably wouldn't bother you because if somebody called you a Jid, you'd probably look at them like they were giving you a compliment. That's why. And the point is that when you are proud of who you are, it's very disarming for anti-Semites. I did not do justice. I'm sorry for wasting your time with that story. Brooke, you wanted to say something else, and then I want to get back to our material. Brooke?
I only just wanted to say that where I live too, we're very much in the minority, but everybody around us is very supportive, very loving, very kind.
Sheila's husband, Tony, was just honored by the city. What was the honor?
Veteran of the Month.
Veteran of the
The
Month.
very first Allied Veteran of the Month. Yeah.
Can you imagine? Sheila could run for mayor and win in Ball Ground.
No.
Brooke. Brooke.
Okay. And Sheila, you're probably less than 10 minutes from me. I'm in Tate. Uh so I wanted to ask, so like we were saying, in this like Appalachian region, this district, such as Ball Ground, Tate, Jasper, LJ, Blue Ridge, can anyone just attend those services, or is it, I mean, is anyone welcome? Or like I haven't, I don't know anything about this.
Absolutely. And in Ball Ground, we now have a menorah that's lit for Hanukkah every year.
Oh wow.
And it's stored in the ex-mayor's house and put up in his garden.
Oh, how nice.
So if you want to come and see our menorah lighting in December, please do.
I would love that. I'll have to look it up. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Brooke,
That's
we
great.
have, go ahead. We have services, Shabbat services, the third Friday of every month. And the Jewish congregation does meet in a church. And Deborah, again, like she said, she kind of screens everybody before she tells them where it is. But we have a process, and you are welcome.
Okay.
How would I go about that if I were to be interested in the future?
Third
Just
Friday.
Just
of the
email
month.
me.
just go to the Jewish Congregation of Blue Ridge website. Yeah, the email is, and it would go to me, info
Mhm.
at jcbrgeorgia.org. And just email me if you're interested, and I will be in touch.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Meanwhile, back in the ranch.
I'll put it in the,
Sorry, Rabbi.
I
All
have
right,
to figure out
everyone.
how to do it. I'll
All
put
right,
it in the,
let's go back to work.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I want to talk about lobbying. First of all, lobbying is not a dark art. Lobbying is how democracy works. Corporations lobby, unions lobby, churches lobby, environmental groups lobby, realtors lobby, doctors lobby, foreign governments lobby. Only broccoli farmers don't lobby because nobody will eat the broccoli. It's open and it's legal. Some spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year, some spend tens of millions. Here's where it gets interesting. All the figures I'm about to give you come from Open Secrets. You can go to opensecrets.com, a nonpartisan research organization pulling directly from federal disclosure data. You can look these up right after we talk. There are actually three different kinds of political money that we're talking about. We're talking about lobbying. We're talking about direct PAC contributions to candidates. And we're talking about super PAC outside spending. Critics of the Israel lobby, which is all you hear about today, tend to pick whichever number sounds the biggest. So we're going to look at all three honestly. First, lobbying. Total federal lobbying in the United States in 2024, $4.4 billion. Who are the top spenders? Top spender, the National Association of Realtors, $86 million. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, $76 million. Big Pharma, pharmaceutical industry, $384 million. APAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the largest pro-Israel lobbying organization in the country, $3.3 million. The realtors outspent APAC nearly 26 to 1. Big Pharma outspent them 117 to 1. Out of the 4.4 billion spent lobbying Congress, APAC was less than 0.1%. Let's look at direct PAC contributions. And I want to be fair here, because this is the number the critics most often cite. APAC's PAC was in fact the largest single PAC contributor to federal candidates in 2024. They gave $55 million to candidates. That's real money. But that 55 million sits inside, a larger picture. Total corporate business PAC contributions in 2024, $756 million, roughly 16 times APAC. Third, what are called super PACs, outside spending. Super PACs can spend unlimited money on advertising and outside electioneering. They are the heavy hitters in modern American elections. This is what makes and breaks the elections. I'm not condoning this whole system, by the way. AIPAC's super PAC, called the United Democracy Project, spent $38 million in outside spending in 2024. Now let's line that up against the actual top spenders. Future Forward USA, the main pro-Harris super PAC, spent $517 million. To be fair, MAGA Inc., the main pro-Trump super PAC, spent $377 million. The Senate Majority PAC, Senate Leadership Fund, Congressional Leadership Super PAC spent over $200 million each. The Koch Network Super PAC, $58 million. And here's the one I find most striking. The cryptocurrency industry super PAC called Fairshake, $46 million. So even cryptocurrency outspent the Israel lobby in 2024. Future Forward, pro-Harris PAC, outspent AIPAC 13-1. I'm sorry for all these statistics. If you add up AIPAC's entire political footprint, lobbying plus political contributions plus this super PAC weird thing, across the whole 2-year election cycle, you get roughly $130 million. That's real money. I'm not pretending that it isn't. But here's the question. Future Forward spent 4 times that on a single election alone. MAGA spent nearly 3 times that on a single election alone. The pharmaceutical industry spent 3 times that on lobbying alone in 1 year. Nobody writes books about the realtor lobby having a grip on Washington. Only the Israel lobby. Nobody writes think pieces about the cryptocurrency lobby's stranglehold on Congress. Nobody whispers about dual loyalty when an industry trade group hosts a fundraiser. So why does only one form of advocacy get called manipulation? And here's what I want you to notice. Only one form of civic advocacy is routinely described not as participation, but as manipulation. Only one is framed as a stranglehold. Only one raises whispers of dual loyalty. Only one is described as having captured Washington. If influence were the real concern, the outrage would track the money. It does not track the money. When one people's civic engagement is always treated as suspect, when their normal democratic participation is described in conspiratorial terms, that nobody applies to the realtors or the doctors or the oil and gas industry, history offers a familiar explanation. The language is modern, the suspicion is ancient. Let me try to bring this home. For most of history, Jews lived without power. They were accused, they were brutalized, they couldn't respond. Today, Jews have a state, and that changes the story people expect to tell. We were expected to be professional victims for all of history. Living lessons of what it means not to embrace Jesus as God. Symbols of what happens when you reject salvation We weren't supposed to be actors. We weren't supposed to be decision makers. That was not written into the script. Israel disrupts that expectation. It blows everybody's mind. So the accusations return, reshaped in modern moral language. Judaism does not claim innocence. We take responsibility. Responsibility to mourn suffering, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. Responsibility to wield power reluctantly. Responsibility to be judged fairly. You don't need to agree with every Israeli policy to reject a double standard. You don't need to silence compassion to insist on clarity. In a world that seems to be addicted to outrage, fairness has become an act of moral courage. And that's all that I'm asking you tonight. Not allegiance, not agreement, certainly not silence, just fairness. Next week, we get back to good old-fashioned rabbi teaching. This is not my thing. What I talked about tonight is not my thing. It's not what I like to talk about. It's not what I want to talk about. But in a course about Judaism and Jews, it has to come up. Next week, we turn somewhere different. Suffering, evil, why bad things happen to good people, or if you prefer the converse, why good things happen to rotten people. How Judaism, after everything we just talked about, still believes. It's going to be a different kind of session, quieter, more personal. So bring whatever you're carrying. Two things to think about. One, notice this week how the language is being used around Israel. Not who's right, just look at the words that are being used. Notice which words are chosen, which words are not. Secondly, if you carry concerns about anything I said tonight, bring them with you next week, or better yet, it's not even 9 o'clock, and I thought we were going to go much later. We can talk about it now. Or you can write me. Honest questions are how this whole thing is supposed to work. Your turn. Anyone? I'm a little scared. I'm not used to this kind of silence. Nobody's got anything to say? Oh, there you are. Susan Berry.
I was late. I forgot. Normally I have no trouble speaking.
Yeah, I know.
But this, I just think, once again, it was the October of 2000 that I was packing up to move up here full time. We'd been up here since 84, part time. And I've got PBS on, and they're talking about, they had finally identified what German, they finally identified Eisenstadt something another, who went in and did what. So I grew
I
up.
don't know. You lost me already, Susan. I'm not sure what you're saying.
Okay. So I grew up with the family that spoke Yiddish when they didn't want the kids to know. So I now, in October of 2000, realized who commanded the German troops to go into Belarus and to go into the Ukraine in Vornovitsa, where the people were, our family. And these were the ones that made my parents, cousins, and all of those remaining dig the trenches shoot them, and then have others bury them. I found out this. My parents were gone. All of them were gone. They never knew. They never knew until there was no answer from Europe anymore. And so I carry that and I study. I try to study all of this. And I'm just horrified and it scares me. And I just heard from my parents who lost all of their remaining family. I'm only a second generation American. So it's personal, you know?
I hear you, Susan. It's personal, and the truth is that there's collective trauma also, even for people whose families did go through the Holocaust. And there's collective trauma for non-Jews who are sympathetic and sensitive to this plight. But this is the world that we live in, and evil obviously has reared its ugly head. I've discussed this with you, I think, before. I don't know, I give so many classes, I forget what I say to who, but I'll just say briefly that that evil realizes that it's engaged in the fight of its life right now, that its number is up, that the gig is over, that goodness and light are about to prevail all over. And because it realizes its number is up, it's pouring it on heavier than it ever has. And that's what we saw, certainly with the Holocaust, and that's what we see today. And the thing that seems to draw all the disparate types of evil to focus in one place, unfortunately, is Israel and the Jew. So we have the distinction of being that lightning rod, if you will, that draws all the attention. They say no Jews, no news. And if you stop and think about it, it's absurd. How could it be this little pipsqueak country of 8 million people? Phoenix County is larger than the state of Israel. New Jersey is larger than the state of Israel. Outside of Washington, D.C., the second largest press pool in the world is in Israel. How can that be? But it is. No Jews, no news. Like it or not, they say that the Jews run the world and the Jews controlled Trump and the Jews controlled Biden and the Jews controlled Washington and Lincoln and whatever it is. And the Jews control Hollywood and the Jews control the banks and the Jews control this and the Jews control that. That kind of stuff, by the way, Robin, is in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Thank you.
All I can tell you is, okay, I'll say it. If we were actually running that stuff, I think we'd probably be doing a much better job.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm joking. Bottom line is, we win. And who's the we I'm talking about? Not just the Jews. I'm talking about all righteous people. And I can assure you, everybody on this call and virtually everybody you know is in the camp of the righteous. And Judaism, unlike other religions, is not exclusive in terms of who gets the free parking card in Monopoly. Everybody gets it. Every righteous person gets it. You don't have to be a Jew to get the orchestra seats. You're not confined to the bleachers. You're not shut out of the stadium. These are lousy analogies, I'm sorry. But anyway, the point is that you don't have to be a Jew in order to get the goodies. You just have to be righteous. You just have to be righteous. You have to do good, justice, compassion, sensitivity, all that kind of stuff. Who else? Thank you for sharing that, Susan. I know it wasn't easy. Who else?
Quick question. Are you surprised the world, I am, did not respond to the scholastic curriculum for Hamas preschoolers and kindergartners killing Jews and with toy guns and soldiers? and the
If you're not
UN.
familiar with, if you're not familiar with what Robin is saying, if you open up a Palestinian textbook for a first grader,
Mhm.
it'll say, if you have 7 Jews and you slaughter 5 of them, how many Jews are left?
Wow.
This is taught in the curriculum,
Mhm.
not just of Hamas, but in the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, also the moderate ones. So this is what we're up against, and the world yawns. And the world calls us, I don't want to say that. The world doesn't call us that. The anti-Semites do.
Okay.
We have a tendency as Jews to generalize and think that everybody's out to get us. They're not. There's good, beautiful, righteous people everywhere in the world. But there's 2 groups of people that are focused on the Jewish issue, Jews and anti-Semites. And that's why it looks like everybody is focused on this stuff.
And
What
if I
else,
could,
guys?
Jonathan, if I could add just an experience that I recently learned of. A friend of mine teaches here in Arizona, and it was a second grade child. She teaches English as a second language, and multiple languages are in her class. And this was a child from Palestine, and there were some symbols or something or other, and one was a Star of David. And this second grade child pointed to the Star of David and said something to the effect of bad. And so it's not just relegated to Palestine geography. It's rampant as within the
In
world.
general. Mhm.
Yeah. And I've just we have a little book club here in our neighborhood, and I've just read a book which absolutely stereotypes Jews. I'm furious, and I'll never read that woman again, but I can't wait to get to our book club meeting to tell everybody what I think of this book and how this woman has stereotyped us. And as my family, well, I'm a mongrel. They're Ukrainian, they're Lithuanian, they're Polish, Hungarian, you name it. But we were all Jewish, and my family came to Britain in the early 1900s, running away from the pogroms. I can't even give this book to anybody to read. I can't bring myself to destroy it because I would hate to destroy a book. What am I going to do with the darn thing? And I am just
Tell us
livid.
what it is.
Who's the author?
Just hold on a minute and I'll get it. Hang on.
My dear friends, not that these things are not true that are being discussed, not that they're not real, but our focus needs to be not on these things. I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not wearing rose-colored spectacles. I know what's going on out there. We need to be involved in bringing redemption to this world. And we do that through acts of kindness, baseless love. What got us in this mess to begin with was baseless hatred. The correction is baseless love. That means getting out of your little circle of affinity, the people that you like, and crossing over to the people who you probably normally wouldn't give the time of day to, and reaching out to them, and sharing with them, and uplifting them. Sheila.